Hi, Jon Velie, CEO of OnlineVisas, and welcome to Voice of Immigration. Today we're going to talk about a couple of things in immigration and a couple of things in life and go from there. The news is that in immigration, premium processing is back up. So as June starts, premium processing, the act of being able to pay $1,440 to get your case done in 2 weeks as opposed to 4 to 6 months, is a great thing for all involved. Immigration has been going broke. They just asked Congress for an allocation of millions, maybe even billions, to keep going. And their biggest filing fee, premium processing, was shut down. So that'll be coming back up, and that's very helpful because some of these cases can be done in a very short period of time, and guys can get to work and get the economy back on track. So that's a good thing. Another thing in immigration is the ITServe Settlement, which makes H1B visas for staffing situations, approvable again. I mean, we got them through. We had a nice track record on those, but they were hard, right? At the heart of the hardness was a memo called the Contracts and Itineraries Memo of February 2018. So in the settlement, after ITServe Alliance won the big lawsuit, USCIS agreed to get rid of the memorandum, and now it's how do you want to petition these cases? So there was a window between March 20th and recently here in about May, in the May 20s, about how we would do that. We started doing some H1Bs. We talked about, okay, we know you still have your checklist based on this memo. We know you've lost these lawsuits. So look, we'll try to comply, but over here we're going to tell you, here's what some judges in black robes told you how you should really look at it. So it's a little easier now. So to do an H1B visa now, you do not have to have the schedule and itinerary. You do not have to prove to a day what the worker's doing, and just show them that you have essentially an agreement with the employee to do the services over 3 years. Now, is it going to get easier across the board for immigration? Probably not. There's still going to be some discussion on occupational titles. OOH is now the database for that, and there's some issues there. But in those ITServe cases, a number of cases that came out in March and February, USCIS lost some big arguments on their very narrow interpretation of how to look at the specialty occupation. They were saying that they would look at OOH and determine how to become one. That's really the tab. And they would use the word most to really mean all, or even in one time they tried to attempt to say that most meant 70%. And a judge blistered them on that. So still, you're going to have to be careful on that. Some professions work better than others. And we may see something come down from the Trump administration that may narrow that more closely. So that segues into our next piece. The presidential proclamation of approximately a month ago had a 30-day window, which was up on February 22nd. Now, we understand that 3 agencies would have filed the reports to the Trump administration, but the Trump administration has not made a statement yet. Now, what were the agencies supposed to report? Well, they're supposed to report that the impact of what are non-immigrant visas. These are kind of the merit-based visas, the guest worker visas, the temporary visas, how they impacted the U.S. workers, right? So, that's a really important question because we're looking at nearly 15% unemployment. We haven't had that since the Great Depression. But are the H-1Bs the fault of that? Is making the H-1B tougher to get for an American company going to solve that problem, or is it just immigration rhetoric? So with the proclamation itself, the president got his immigration rhetoric in. I'm going to stop immigration from outside the United States. And his crowd said yay, and those opposed him said boo, and it didn't move much. But so does really hammering the H-1B and the other non-immigrant visas going to help? Well, first of all, how many H-1Bs are there in the workforce? Well, you're probably looking in the low single-digit percentages, right? So not very many. Secondly, what professions are they in? Well, they're techies, they're doctors, they're lawyers, and for the most part, it's techies, right? And so is the tech industry, are Americans losing their jobs because of the pandemic in the tech industry? Well, maybe some, right? It would be wrong to say that, nobody that had a STEM degree in the United States didn't lose their job, and there's 15% unemployment. So there is, but what does it really mean? So if people did lose their job in the tech industry, there are other parts in the country where it is booming. And why is it booming? How is it booming if we're having such a bad economy? Well, think about it. So as companies shut down, some are determined essential, and those need people. Others have been trying to work from home, and so they've needed innovation, right? So the innovation is built by who? Well, tech companies, right? So if you need to build a new system because your workers are no longer in a location to get it done, you're going to call a tech company. Those tech companies are going to hire techies. So what that means is that while somebody may have lost a job in one location or been furloughed, they can go somewhere else and get the same job in another location. And prior to Corona, the unemployment rate was a negative unemployment rate in some cities for those with STEM degrees in the technical fields, right? So hammering the H1B, stopping that is just going to stop that innovation. It's going to stop those companies that are trying to succeed. And what's going to happen is those jobs will go overseas. And not just the jobs of the techies, not just the jobs of the H1Bs. So if your entire tech department has to go to India or up to Canada, then your six-figure managerial jobs or your big-time executive jobs or your sales, your marketing, all these other jobs, why do they have to stay in the United States? Why wouldn't you just shut down your U.S. operations and go there? So that's the negative part of, hammering the H-1B. We'll see what happens. There are a number of congressional leaders, mostly on the Republican side, really led by Chuck Grassley and some others that have always been after the H-1B, the L-1, the EB-5, visas. And so we'll see what the president does. I think he's weighing a couple of different things. A number of Republican presidents, including Tom Cole from Oklahoma here, said, don't hammer the H-2A and H-2B visa. We need those. Those are visas for what they call guest workers, right? This is the term of art. The merit-based visas, that's the H-1B. The guest workers, those are seasonal workers that come in to work on farms. They come in to work in agriculture. They come in to work as laborers, right? And literally, crops will rot in the ground if we don't have enough people to do that. And it's not like people with six-figure jobs in America are going to go start pulling cabbage in the Central Valley of California. It's going to happen. Didn't happen before. It's not going to happen now. We need those people. So just stopping that visa is a short-sighted thing to do. So we're hoping that that won't be a big deal. So who is going to be hammered by that? So I've kind of divided it into a couple of things. So we talked about the H-2A and the H-2B. If the Republican senators are saying don't harm the H-2A and H-2B, it's probably safe. The H-1B, more opponents of it, but man, big business needs it. Don't see that really happening. Or if they do, will they declare certain industries essential, certain workers essential? And that's what we see some of the bigger companies trying to do. The L1A, international companies, probably safe. The E2, international investors, probably safe. The EB5, big opponent in Chuck Grassley in the Senate, but it was excluded from the other green cards in the presidential proclamation from being done outside the United States. So if it was excluded before, would they really put it back in now? Did anything really change enough on that? And the EB5, actually the prerequisite is to get a green card for the EB5, which takes almost 2 years to get, by the way. You have to create 10 jobs for Americans. So that is really against the logic, right, of why would you stop that if Americans are out of work, if we can have an investor create a job that creates jobs for them, right? So that's that. So it leaves one interesting immigration component, and that's the optional practical training card. And OPT is what students get when they graduate. They get it for a year for most majors and 3 years if they're a STEM graduate. STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and math, right? So those are the techies again. A lot of people come from China. A lot of people come from India. They do the OPT for 3 years. They are a major part of our workforce. And they're just kind of some debate on whether to shut OPT all the way down. Now, that's going to have such a devastating effect on our universities. The unintended circumstances, right? So we've already lost about $1 billion a piece for Chinese and Indians coming in, just because the job market got harder with the restrictive analysis this administration's had on immigration with H1Bs and all of that anyway, right? They're like, hey, man, this is a tough place to go. Maybe we shouldn't. If you cut off the OPT and the ability for them to walk into the workplace after they've spent out of state, out of country tuition in U.S. universities, probably not going to come as much, right? So that's what we have on that. So look, that's a couple things on immigration. I'm Jon Velie. This is practicing law on a Hawaiian shirt, which I do on Friday, and this is an Elvis Hawaiian shirt. This is a TCB with a lightning bolt, Elvis's logo, taking care of business in a flash. And quite ironic that I found one that said Velie Law Firm with the Kaido Liberty. Very, very rare. They only made a few of them, but I snatched one up, happened to have one in my size. It was pretty cool. Now that we're practicing law in a Hawaiian shirt and it's Friday, I want to hoist a beer to all you out there. It's been a crazy week, tough week. We've surpassed 100,000 deaths in the United States for the coronavirus, and we witnessed a very, very ugly thing. We witnessed the senseless, cruel murder of George Floyd at the hands of a police officer in Minnesota, in Minneapolis in particular. And what was really rough about that is the police officer had his knee on the gentleman's neck. The guy was handcuffed. He was completely on the ground. He had a number of police officers around him. The guy wasn't a risk in any way. And he literally just stayed there kind of without emotion until the man died. And what really made it rough is that there were two people, if you watch this video, talking to the police officers. One was a strength and conditioning coach that was saying things like, the man's unresponsive. The other was a Minneapolis, what was she? She was a paramedic, and she was a white lady. The strength and conditioning coach was an African American, and they're saying, look, I'm a paramedic. He's in trouble. And the guy didn't care. He just stayed there. He didn't care. And what was really ironic and really painful about it is, the paramedics came and he just got off of the guy and they put him in the hospital and he went and then he died. And we all saw this, right? We all saw this, and it triggers an interesting debate. What I think it really triggers is, and I want to say this from the perspective of an attorney and somebody that deals with the government, right? And both of those things are important in my analysis. I'm not going to spin one of the sides that we've been reading on social media. I want to kind of take it from a little different thing about how to look at it. Well, the thing about that death, not only was it a white man and a black man, helpless black man dying, that is what has triggered the response. But it's really authority, the police department. And what we seem to have lost is that, and we see this in the military, in the Marines. My dad's a Marine, and the Marines were really good at policing Marines that acted outside the scope. There was a lot more respect for the process, or is a lot more respect for the process in the Marine Corps to deal with kicking somebody out of the Marines because they're not acting in the proper manner. And they really respect that. There is very little respect, it seems, and this is a general statement, in the investigations of police officers who act outside the scope of their authority. I think within the departments, there's not a lot of respect for that. I think there is a sense in some departments to cover up these things. You've seen in this police officer that he's had run-ins before, right? So, in other countries, they talk about that. If you're going to use lethal force, that you really have to explain it. I mean, shouldn't you have to explain and go through a process anytime you take somebody's life? Shouldn't that be a really big thing? Shouldn't the fact that, look, in society, I do not have a right to take someone's life. I can defend myself. I can defend my family to a certain degree. It's called self-defense. But police officers, as part of their jobs, can use lethal force, right? So that duty, in looking at the man that took this other man's life, didn't seem to respect that duty much, right? That's what I think frustrated me. that he just sat there and took it and then nonchalantly got up and said, let's get out of here. He wasn't shaken. He didn't seem to be alarmed when this happened. And that was really, really distressing. And then, the leadership from the city after that, right? I mean, the police didn't take responsibility of it very quickly. I think they may have fired the guy to some extent or put him on some sort of leave. I'm not sure. I'm not trying to say that there was no action taken, but he wasn't arrested until quite some time later, and not until after really, really bad rioting happened. And so what we see really from some people in our society is more anger at the riots than the event itself. And look, I'm not here to condone the riots by any means, but if society is supposed to be protected by these police officers, and these police officers don't respect the fact that they can take a life and they feel no remorse for that whatsoever, or do not have to really answer for that in any way, don't have to be held financially responsible, that's paid by insurance, any of those sort of things, is it starting to break down the trust? Are you really protecting us? And I think when they didn't do that, when they didn't take action, I think what it said to the African American community, maybe the minority community as a whole, is our job's not to protect you, you're the enemy. And one of the things that's been bothering me a little bit in the way the police have handled their jobs in the last number of years is the military, no, I'm going to butcher that police forces have become more militarized. And we've seen it really after the wars in the Middle East, where, police forces were getting all sorts of equipment and vehicles that were much more like military vehicles to police us in our country, right? And it's sort of like, are we being occupied now by police forces, right? Now, not everybody's going to agree with that concept, but look at it. Look at how the police in certain areas are looking at their jobs as if they're at war, as if they are occupying areas, and that American citizens are really like the occupied people of a country we're at war with, right? That's what it sort of starts to feel like. And I think in that group, then people of color feel like they're really the enemy. And if you look at the statistics of how many are in jail, they know that. They don't feel that they are being treated equally. They feel they're out that way. So while I don't condone any looting, and I definitely wouldn't like if my company was firebombed, I also wouldn't like if my brother or my uncle or my father was killed just because he had forged a check, and for no reason more than that. So empathy, right, is the thing of acting like other people or imagining you're the other people and what they feel, right? So I think what we need to feel is not that it's okay to have looted, but how did these folks feel when they feel that no one is protecting them, that they are the enemy now? This is how revolt happens. Now, what's really ironic about that is a lot of the people that are the up in arms the most about the revolting were in complete support of, white Americans walking into the state capitals armed to the teeth, and nothing happened to them. They were insulting to the police officers that were there. They were literally in their faces during the coronavirus breakout, not wearing masks because they were told they had to wear masks. Their liberties were taken because they couldn't, they were forced to have to wear a mask or forced to stay home during a pandemic. Well, what do you think, this gentleman, George Floyd, and his family feels like? His complete life was taken. His liberties were much more stripped. Just being shackled is the taking of a liberty. And what we've seen in recent life, and I really, really want to shout out to my brothers and sisters in the African American, Hispanic community, Native American communities, any of those that feel like they're targeted just because of who they are, their skin color, their ethnicity. Hell, what even about the Asians in our country that are being blamed because of the coronavirus, right? That's their fault somehow, that they are personally at fault because the coronavirus may have been manufactured, may have escaped from the Wuhan, lab, right? That they're being punished because of this. And this is something that is really dividing our country. And we need to unite. We have to quit blaming each other for all of this stuff. We have to come together right now. We are a divided country. Yes, it's a political year. Yes, social media is dousing a lot of these things, but our leadership needs to be better than this. We don't need to be calling people thugs from the top position in the land. We don't need to say, if there's looting, there's going to be shooting. We need to come together. We need someone to say, look, we're all okay. What really I would love to see happen, right, in one man's opinion, is the Minneapolis Police Department to say, we got this. When somebody in our ranks acts this way, we take care of it. We do the right thing and we do it fast, right? They could have arrested the man immediately, right? Does that mean he dies like George Floyd? No. That means he goes in front of a judge, he pleads not guilty, and he's out on bond. Maybe if they thought it was a really bad murder, that he has a higher bond, or maybe he stays in there. But then they investigate further. He gets to have an attorney. He gets to have his day in court. And if this death, this taking the life of George Floyd was somehow mitigated, like self-defense, I guess, or something else like that, then he won't be in trouble, right? But they didn't do that. They didn't at all. And so what they said is that this man, who has no value for your life, is in charge of determining whether or not you're going to be shackled and put to jail. And we don't care about you. And that's what it is. And so this isn't equal, right? This isn't white versus black. This is authority. This is governments that can act and take a life without any regard for that life. And this has to stop. So what could our president have done? What could our president still do, right? He's not Minnesota. He's not the governor, and he's not the mayor. But he is the president of the United States. And instead of saying, if there's looting, there's going to be shooting, what if he said, look, we need to address what's happening in our police forces. We need to say that all citizens, no matter their color, no matter their race, no matter what they believe, feels like they're being protected by our police forces, not that they're being hunted by them, because that's how they feel. And if you're saying, oh, well, but looters are just breaking the law, well, some of them are. That's true. But that revolution feeling is there because people feel that they don't have any other place to go, right? And the same people that say they don't understand that feeling walked into state capitals with AK-47s and pointed them at police officers, right? Were fully in buildings that say you cannot bring firearms in there. They brought them in masses. And you know what the police did there? Nothing. Let them do it. Our president appreciated that, right? That's what he says in his tweets, that these are fine people that are protesting, right? So why are we so divided? Why do we have to be so divided? Let's get past that. Let's unify America. This is Jon Velie. I'm practicing law in a Hawaiian shirt. I'm drinking a Bud Light. I'm about to have a wonderful weekend, and I hope you have one too. Thanks for listening to me. Take care.